it's 8 o'clock. Shall I do a brief introduction and then I'll pass on to Janet? Okay, great. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Jinzhao Li, Director of Cambridge China Center. Very glad to see everybody online again. A very warm welcome to everybody on this special day, the Remembrance Sunday. Cambridge China Center, the Confucius Institute for Business London, and Wine Peak are very proud to have been presenting a note of Mandarin Wine Club, a webinar series hosted fortnightly on Sundays by Jenny Wang, author of the Chinese Wine Renaissance. We are very happy to see that our online wine sessions have gradually become a very important part of many, more and more people's daily life, our lifestyle. Every 2 Sundays, old friends, new friends meet online, and we have the wine ready, white wine chilled, glass polished, and some people will also order some Chinese food to go with the wine, or even invite friends to join with them. It's becoming a more and more important part for us to catch up with friends, and also a very unique chance to understand some Chinese history and culture and Chinese wine as well. We are very happy to see friends online today. Trevor from Cheshire, Hugh and Jane again from Portugal, Trevor, Martin and Trudy from Sussex, and with William Lowe from Cambridge, and many other friends from all over the UK mainly. And today, Janet is going to talk about Chinese wine regions around the capital, including Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei province. We have 2 wines ready, and without further ado, let's welcome Jenny Wang to share with us. And everybody enjoy your time at the Note of Mandarin Wine Club today.
Thank you, Jinzhao. Good evening, everybody, and welcome again to our Sunday meetup, Sunday Wine Club. So today, let me quickly share my slides. We're going to go to the wine regions around the capital area. The capital obviously being Beijing. Just to remind everyone of the format that we're doing now. So we've got this special series is focused on wine regions of China. So we'll talk about wine regions, but also the culture, the food, the area, related around wine. So it's not just about wine, but also about the place and the people and the customs. So hopefully you will get a more rounded session, a rounded understanding of China with a glass of wine in hand, hopefully. So we have a mixed case of Chinese wines from award-winning boutique wineries from 6 different regions. So today we're going to cover 2 white wines in this particular case. So one from Beijing, and it's an organic white wine, and the other one from Hebei, a white wine made from quite a special Chinese grape, right? So that's the 2 wines we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about the areas where they come from. So the areas around capital, we have coined a phrase called Jing Ji, right? So that's the Jing, the first J-I-N-G correspond to Beijing. The second one, Jing, J-I-N, correspond to Tianjin, and Ji is the short form for Hebei province. So Jing is the capital economic zone. So just to set the scene a little bit. So when we talk about Jing as wine regions of China, it's almost incidental, actually. Jing itself refers to the capital economic zone. And in China, we have 3 major economic clusters. So just to set the scene a little bit, they are the Pearl River Delta, Zhujiang Sanjiaozhou, or we say Zhu Sanjiao, right? So this is the area around Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, Macau, so that cluster. And this is the cluster that became very prominent at the end of 80s, 90s, due to the reform and opening up process, right? So this was the region where you could find the special economic zones of China, the first test beds for foreign investments, for the export sector that drove the initial growth of the 80s and 90s, right? So Shenzhen, Guangzhou being close to Hong Kong, Macau, etc., and being, around the very important coastal ports. That's what created the first economic cluster. And today, they are still one of the three most important economic zones in China. And the GDP around this cluster is over $2 trillion US, which is almost the size of the economy of Spain or something. Yeah, so Italy, that's a rare. So very important region. And then you have the Yangtze River Delta, the Changjiang Sanjiaozhou, or we call it Changsanjiao. Right, so this is pivoted around Shanghai, another very major seaport. Around Shanghai, where the Yangtze River goes into the sea. Right, so this region really started growing also in the 90s, but the Changsanjiao name, right, this cluster was formally named into a strategic plan only around 2016, I think. So, but it's been developing, and now it's the most important and most prosperous region of China, both in terms of the agglomeration of urban cities and population, but also in terms of the GDP. Again, over $2 trillion of GDP. Accounting for roughly 20% of the population of China, etc. So again, one of the leading agglomerations, and this is where all the free trade centers, around Shanghai are being rolled out, as the free trading center, with Shanghai being the new financial service center of China on the mainland. And then we have the Jing-Jin-Ji area, which is Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei provinces. So this cluster is fairly new in terms of being made into part of the China's strategic plan, and as in economic agglomeration, but the term was really coined much earlier as well, probably in the 80s, 90s as well. So Jing-Jin-Ji as an economic cluster is a bit smaller than the other two. Right now, it's accounts for 9% of China's total GDP, around $1.2 trillion, which is around the GDP of Mexico, so 8.1% of China's population, that sort of size. But Jing-Jin-Ji is also the center of a larger economic cluster, which is around the Bohai area as well. So essentially, the idea is that these economic clusters would sort of expand outwards and bring positive economic benefit to increasingly larger areas. So it's like a concentric circle that keeps on expanding outwards. That's kind of the idea, right? So Jing-Jin-Ji, first of all, is an economic hub of China, and its advantage, versus the other two. So we mentioned the Pearl River Harbor came up because of the reform and opening up, being the first area where the special economic zones were set up, and benefiting from this outward exporting strategies around the fact that it's close to Hong Kong and Macau, right? And the Changjiang, the Yangtze River Delta, that's more based around after China joined the WTO, you had the economic prosperity of the mainland of industries around the Shanghai region. And also this is the area where a quarter of China's top universities are based, right? So you have huge amount of talent pool, etc. So being sort of close to research and innovation, and being now the free trade test beds, to set up the new financial services on the mainland. So that's sort of the Yangtze River Delta advantage. Whereas Jing-Jin-Ji is very much the political center, right? It's close to the capital, Beijing. So it's very much attuned and sensitive to sort of policy-driven investments, right? And yeah, so it's the political heartland of China, and as a sort of a fairly new economic hub as well. So, so the first wine, if you have it, the wine from Beijing, it's from a sort of a suburb area of Beijing in the southwest, as you can see on this map. It come from Fangshan area, this wine. This is a new wine region on the outskirts of Beijing. And it is famous as a site for the Peking Man, right? So this is a very important site, which is essentially in Fangshan. And around this site, we found the fossils of something called the Peking Man, the Homo erectus pekinensis, right, which dates to around 700,000 to 200,000 years ago. And then they also found archaic Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens sapiens, which dates from 200,000 to 30,000 years ago. So it's a very important site for studying the evolution of humanity. And they've also found tools, stone tools, and evidence that the Peking Man was able to use fire, right, to use stone tools to make fire. And they also found lots of animal fossils. So very, very important site, and with a lovely, very informative museum and exhibition. So I would highly recommend that if you go to Beijing, go to this Peking Man site at Zhoukou-Dian, which actually is in Fangshan. And then the wine, this Bolongbao, Chateau Bolongbao, is literally a 15-minute drive from this site. So I could recommend that you also visit the vineyard while you're there as well. So Beijing, of course, has a very long history of being a very important center. So it's the capital of 5 dynasties, imperial dynasties, as well as, of course, the capital of present-day China. So 5 dynasties had their capital here, but it was also a military base for most of its history. As early as 1027 BC, during Zhou dynasty, it was called Yandu or Jichen. So again, that was based in Fangshan as well. So Fangshan was a bit of a hub, of a civilization as well as a political center as far as back in Zhou dynasty. And then from Yandu, it changed its name to Yanjing. So Yanjing, sometimes we still call Beijing as Yanjing. There's a famous beer, Beijing beer called Yanjing, and that's why, because Yanjing was an ancient name of Beijing when it was the capital of Liao dynasty. And then it changed its name again to Zhongdu, capital of Jing during the Jing dynasty. Zhong means middle, Du means capital. So at that point, Jing is a dynasty, is a tribe that came from the north, right, in the sort of the more nomadic steppes area. So from their perspective, Beijing to them was sort of the middle capital. They had other capitals around the different areas. So they decided to call the current day Beijing the middle capital, right? And then by the Yuan dynasty, which was in the 13th century, Zhongdu was renamed Dadu. Dadu means big capital. Da is big, right? So Yuan dynasty concentrated power into Beijing as the one single capital and called the big capital, Dadu, right? So from Yuan dynasty then to Ming dynasty, it was briefly called Beiping. Bei means north, Ping means peace, right? So by that time, you know, the emperor wanted a capital that's peaceful, right? So it's called Beiping, and northern peace in the north, right? So Beijing was briefly called Beiping, and then it was changed to Beijing, which is the name that we know now, right? So during the Ming dynasty and Qing dynasty, it was called Beijing. But then after the imperial dynasties were overthrown during the fairly chaotic period between the founding of the Republic and civil war and foreign invasions, etc. Beijing was then had a period where it toggled, the name kind of toggled between Beiping and Beijing for a little while until in 1949, with the founding of the People's Republic of China, then the name finally settled on Beijing again, right? So that's a very fast history of the name of Beijing. So now talking about Fangshan. Fangshan is a very interesting wine region of Beijing. How does it differentiate itself? Because Fangshan, as we know, as you can probably imagine, the land around Beijing, around the capital, you know, they are fairly valuable. So it's almost surprising to even have a wine area. So Fangshan, the vineyards generally are redeployed poor agricultural land in the sort of suburban regions of greater Beijing, right? It is quite ideally situated for wine growing because the latitude, you know, 40 degrees north, you know, as you can imagine, is sort of similar to Bordeaux, you know, it's a ideal classical latitude. It has a continental climate, but still has this monsoon influence from the east. At the moment, there are 19 wineries occupying 1,000 hectares. So Fangshan is really trying to establish itself as a new name card for sustainability. So they're very into sort of organic methods and precision-based, high-tech-based viticulture done in a sustainable way, right? So Bolongbao, this wine we're tasting tonight, is one of the first, well, it's the first vineyard in China that is certified organic, not just in China, but also in EU and US, right? So it's got EU and US certification for organic wine as well. And it was a first in China. So being close to Beijing, you can imagine this area, the vineyards, they're not very big, but they're very complete in the services they provide. They're very big on corporate entertainment and tourism. So one slightly interesting fact was, despite the global pandemic, they went ahead with this cultural wine festival this year in Fangshan between September and October. And it attracted 30,000 visitors, right? So, so yeah, pretty good considering what's going on in the world this year. So, as you can see from some of these pictures here, you know, wine tourism in China is done with a family in mind. You know, it's not like children. There's some kind of taboo about introducing wine to children at all. So, vineyards in China, they would certainly cater for entertainment for children. You know, as you can see here, you know, there's some very happy children, you know, having fun in the vineyard as well. The the picture in the center shows you the type of precision tech-based viticulture that's going on in Fangshan. So this area, although it's quite temperate, you know, it has good sunshine hours, it's quite warm in the summer, but it is also susceptible to rain, to hail, etc. So over here you can see the vineyards working closely with the meteorology office, installing a lot of sensors to detect a lot of data, weather data, you know, to do with moisture, wind, precipitation, sunshine, etc. You know, they work very closely with the weather station to preempt as far as possible any problems, you know, with rain or with gale, with hail, etc. Right, so that's kind of a test bed area for these type of high-tech, high-precision viticulture. The other thing they are trying to experiment is this idea of having vines which can be left out during winter. As you might know, if you've been following my sessions, I've sort of said many times, in northern China, a lot of these vineyards, they have to bury the vines during winter because the winter are too dry, too cold, and the vines cannot survive these extreme cold conditions. So in Fangshan, being sort of northern China, usually you do have to bury the vines, right, in winter. But several vineyards in Fangshan are experimenting with varieties, but also hybrids, and also just agricultural practices, such as using a type of white film to cover the vineyards, etc., to see if the vines can actually survive without burying. And they've showed some early stage successes, and some of the vines were able to not only live, but show great condition with these techniques being left out in the cold during winter. So this is quite interesting, and it could have huge implications for northern Chinese vineyards in the future, right? So that's sort of the what makes Fangshan kind of special and interesting to watch, despite the fact that it's not a terribly big wine region at all, you know, but it's very interesting. So this wine in particular we're drinking tonight, as you can probably, you probably noticed, it's a rather unusual blend. So 100% organic and fairly low alcohol as well. So fairly low alcohol, fairly easy to drink. I'll just have a quick go through of the various grape varieties because they're quite interesting. Some of you might have noticed that they're quite French, especially a bit northern Rhone in style. So first of all, Petit Mansen, 小芒森, or sometimes 小满胜 or 配特门森 in Chinese, right? So it's a key white variety in southwest France, and usually made into a sweet wine by sort of leaving the grapes to sort of shrivel in order to remove the water content and make the sugar more concentrated, thereby making a very lovely sweet wine. You know, it's a late ripening variety with excellent high acidity to balance the sugar content, right? And, you know, it's fairly thick-skinned, loose sponge, which kind of helps with this sort of organic vineyard in the Fangshan area that occasionally gets threatened by rot and diseases if you get rain and monsoon type of condition. Right? So that kind of helps a bit. The thick skin helps to avoid rotting. So typical fruit, peachy, apricot, citrus, sweet spice type of characters, right? So which I think you can detect in this wine. Yeah, the good acidity and the fruity character. Then it's got some Viognier in this wine as well. Again, traditionally found in south of France, but actually quite a few Chinese vineyards are starting to like Viognier as a white variety to plant. Typically, it's quite a powerful, full-bodied, dry white wine, right? With very heady floral, aromatic notes. So again, thick-skinned, low-yielding. So for a boutique winery, you know, this they don't want too much a high yield, for example. So again, the vineyard they did say Viognier is something they quite like to plant here. Then in the blend, you get a bit of Chardonnay as well. So Chardonnay is the most planted white wine grape in China, actually, and in many parts of the world. It's very popular. The Chardonnay is something that's quite easy to grow, and it can express different characters in different land, and also it is very pliant to the winemaker's winemaking process, right? So you can make a vast range of styles with a Chardonnay. You know, it's a winemaker's grape, and it has great affinity with oak. So you can find unoaked Chardonnay that's more steely, maybe crispier, versus on the other spectrum, very oaky Chardonnay that's buttery and creamy, right? So people tend to like Chardonnay for different reasons, or sometimes they don't like Chardonnay for the wrong reasons because they don't realize that Chardonnay actually can be made almost into any style as well. So Chardonnay is a very sort of useful, expressive grape, and here in blending or as a single varietal, it's popular with winemakers. And Hushan, which is again a south of France Rhone area variety, traditionally found in the Rhone region, and often in northern Rhone, it's blended with Marsanne. Again, a very intense and aromatic grape that imparts these fruity pears and herbal tea and floral flower type of characters. So this all blended together, I think this wine is very floral, very aromatic. And I think you can, you know, without knowing it's from China, you would probably guess that it's from France, right? Because it does have a lot of these French features to it. But at the same time, you almost feel this is not quite French either. It does have something of its own character as well, which is why it's rather interesting. It's not so full-bodied, it's quite light and delicate. So it's a very interesting blend in its own right, and coming from China, from a organic vineyard in China. I think it's a great conversation piece. And later when we open up for discussion, I'll be very, very curious, interested to hear what you guys think about this wine. In terms of food of Beijing, the Beijing area, so of course the kaoya, right, Peking duck, right, that's the dish that everybody knows about. But also, you know, if you know that in Peking duck, the Beijing kaoya, the sauce, 甜面酱, right? So the 甜面酱 is a fermented sweet bean sauce. And this sauce can also be used in cooking, right? So we have another dish that's famous in Beijing called 京酱肉丝, right? So it's kind of shredded pork cooked with this 甜面酱, this sweet bean sauce. Beijing is also famous for many, many other type of snacks, mainly, and small dishes, but also 涮羊肉 is very famous. It's a very thinly sliced lamb in hot pot, right? So it's a lamb hot pot, really. So I think with the wine pairing, I would say the wine that we're having, the Bolonbao, I think you'll go okay with the lamb hot pot, because the lamb in this instance is cooked very simply in hot pot. It's just boiled in boiling water, and it's very thinly sliced. It's almost like a white meat. And also lamb from this area in the north of China, typically from Mongolia, that's an area, they're very, the meat is very fine, very delicate. They're almost like a white meat actually. And also with the Jinjiang 肉丝, I think a white wine would work quite nicely with the acidity and the aromatics. But Peking duck, actually, I would be more inclined to drink the Pinot Noir that we had last week. Not last week. In the last session, we had a Pinot Noir from China. I think that would probably have a greater affinity with something like Peking duck. So now we move on to Jing, J-I-N, right, in the Jing Jing Ji story. So Jing refers to Tianjin. Tianjin has always been called the gate to Beijing, right, because Tianjin is the port city. It has been a very important port city for most of its existence, actually, for the entire existence. So it was first came into, it was called Jing. So Jing used to mean the passage for the emperor. This refers to the Sui dynasty when China opened the Grand Canal project of linking internal waterways to help with trade and shipping food crops from the south to the north, and shipping silks from regions like Hangzhou and Suzhou upwards to the north, and also sending military equipment, etc. Right. So the Grand Canal was very, very important to connect the internal Chinese waterways. And Tianjin basically came into existence because it was the intersection of the Grand Canal, right? So Jing essentially meant the passageway of the emperor, right? So because it leads all the goods, all the things from China leads to the capital, to the emperor. So as you can see, its location, it's Tianjin port is a top 10 port of the world, right? It handles a huge amount of cargo each year, with I think 60 countries or something like that. So it's an international port, a top 10 port in the world, and also it was much contested during the Qing dynasty and subsequently during the Civil War, because of its strategic location. So it was at various points, it has concession regions, a bit like Shanghai, where you had the French concession, the British, the Germans, everybody wanted to trade through Tianjin. So Tianjin still has a lot of these colonial architecture. If you ever go to Tianjin, it will be very interesting to go visit some of these cathedrals built by the French, or private member clubs built by the British, etc. There are a lot of very interesting colonial legacies in Tianjin still. And today it's Zhixiashi, which is a direct administered municipality of China, which means it is governed directly by the central government. So although it's a city, it ranks at the same level as the province. It has a direct line to the central government. So that's a Zhixiashi, right? So Tianjin is the birthplace of the Dynasty winery. So Dynasty winery is very important in the history of Chinese wine, the modern Chinese wine industry, because it was a direct result of this reform and opening up policy. So Dynasty was founded in 1980, being one of the very earliest Sino-foreign joint venture. So it was the joint venture between Tianjin City Grape Garden and Remy Martin, right? So, and they built this vast French chateau, basically, with a pyramid that's a tribute to the Louvre. So, you know, it was a very grand project and, you know, indication of intent that China was open and open for foreign investment and technology and industry. So Wang Chao winery, well, it has many vineyards, obviously, across China these days, not just in Tianjin, although Tianjin was where it started, but today it has vineyards in many key regions, wine regions of China, including places like Ningxia as well. So at its peak, I think it was making 70,000 tons of wine, and sort of when it was in its heyday, it was frequently used as the sort of the state banquet wine, or served as state functions or government functions. So dynasty, along with Changyu and Great Wall, are the three main wine companies of China. So at the moment, we don't really have much dynasty wines in the UK. That's why today I can't show you any, but hopefully in the future, hopefully we can get some wines from dynasty as well, and hopefully we'll find opportunities to showcase some of the different styles, because dynasty, they make wine, but they also make brandy. You know, they make lots of different types of alcoholic drinks as well. Very wide repertoire because of their size. Tianjin is famous for 小笼包, right? 小笼包, this type of steamed buns, small buns with usually a pork filling and soup, right? So the most famous 小笼包 brand in China is called 狗不理包子. So 狗不理 means even the dog won't look at it. 包子, right? And it has quite a endearing story. So the founder of 狗不理 was just a street vendor, and his business was terrible, right? So one day, out of desperation, he started to shout, "Oh, you know, my 小笼包, even the dogs won't have it. How do I get rid of my my 包子?" Right? So he started to shout to passerbys, and that attracted a lot of interest. You know, it's some kind of reverse psychology going on. So once he started to call his 小笼包, even the dogs won't have it, 包子. Suddenly everybody wanted a piece, right? So, and afterwards the customers thought, actually this is very delicious. So 狗不理包子 eventually became the sort of the greatest brand really in China, and still is today, of 小笼包. And Tianjin is also famous for a type of savory crepe with a fritter sort of filling called 煎饼果子. So if you ever go to Tianjin, you must try it, and it's best served by a street vendor in one of these little carts, right? And it's interesting. It's like a crepe essentially, but the skin is made from green bean flour, and the center has a sort of lightly battered, crispy fritter. We call 油条, right? So 煎饼果子 is a very typical sort of snack or breakfast served in China. So yeah, so well, if you're gonna have 煎饼果子 for breakfast, you probably won't be drinking wine with it. But in case you do, I personally think, you know, it'll go with either of the two white wines we have today, and similarly for 狗不理包子, because of I think with Chinese wines and any wine pairing with Chinese food in general, what you want is a bit of acidity, right? That acidity usually just lifts the wine and also cuts through the grease. You know, even in gobuli baozi, the filling is quite rich, especially with this sort of liquid, the soup, which is sort of a lard-based soup, right? So you want something fairly refreshing to cut through the grease as well. Yeah, so either of our today's white wine, I think, would go with these two specialities. So now we go on to Ji, which is the short name for Hebei province. So this time we're dealing with a province. So in Hebei province, the wine we're tasting today comes from the northwest of Beijing, an area called Huailai. So we'll focus on that particular sub-region today. So Huailai is the northwest of Beijing, whereas there's another sub-region called Changli, which is northeast of Beijing and has a more maritime climate because it's sort of by the sea, whereas Huailai is more surrounded by mountains, right? It's more inland with a continental type of climate. So the second wine we're tasting is called Dragon Eye Longyan. Again, fairly light, 11.5% alcohol, you know, easy drinking, nice wine. Longyan is a grape that is actually a European variety, but it's been growing in China for, we think, over 800 years. And we haven't yet identified exactly what it is, where it came from in Europe, and whether it's still growing in Europe at all. So actually, Longyan, you know, to the Chinese is being fully adopted as a Chinese grape by now, you know. Yeah, so it's quite a special wine made from this, we feel, very Chinese grape, being in China for 800 years. So Martin Winery has an interesting story. It was founded in 1997 and inspired by a state visit from a former British Prime Minister, Ted Heath, right? So Ted Heath went to Hebei, this area, and he remarked that, oh, you know, maybe you should find some wine industry in this region. And as a consequence, there was actually a Sino-British joint venture a year later to plant 300 plus hectares of vines in this region. So Yanhuai Valley is now a very promising wine region. You know, it's surrounded by mountains, it's slightly high altitude. So Martin Vineyard is at a height of around 750 meters. Right? So you get a lot of good sunshine, you get good ripening condition, warm sandy loam soil that helps with retaining heat and reflecting heat. So it's a warm type of soil. So great condition for growing vines here, and very distinct seasonalities as well. But again, being a northern sort of region, it is still a bit prone to rain, and sometimes the rain season could be slightly erratic. So it does have its challenges as well. So interestingly, when we talk about longyan to Chinese people, it's usually a type of fruit, right? Longan, I think in English is known as longan, the fruit. So that's not to be confused at all with this fruit, right? So we are actually talking about a grape called longyan. So this, very interestingly, the first ever Chinese dry white wine produced was made with the Longyan grape, but that was done by the Great Wall Wine Company back in the 1980s as well, in Hebei province as well. So Hebei is now the main region for growing Longyan grape. And because it has a long history already of growing in China, we can find some old vine examples of this type of wine, made from old vines, some even 100+ years old vines, Longyan vines. And that's unusual in China because typically the vines are quite young in China, right? Typically between 7 to 20 years is sort of the range. Whereas with some Longyan wines, you can find old vines of 100+ years, right? So very interesting. If you do, in the UK, we can't get so many examples, but if you're ever in Hebei, there are several premium estates that's now making very good quality Longyan wine, despite the fact that actually it started off as a table grape, which is to be eaten fresh, really. Yeah, so interesting grape, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this particular wine as well. Huailai area, so here's just a quick map to show you its relative position to Beijing, and also this, you can see the sort of the topography of the land, with all these mountain ranges, and this there's a reservoir here, so a body of water, which I have previously mentioned, sort of moderates the weather condition and the day and night temperature differences as well. So bodies of water always create a bit of a microclimate and has a moderating effect on temperature. So Huailai, depending on the altitude, depending on which side of the vineyard site, you can have some rather interesting microclimates around different vineyard sites. And I'll mention a dish, and it's very local. It's 炸河虾, right? So this is a freshwater prawns that come from the reservoir, actually. So Martin Vineyard, the owner, highly recommends that if you ever visit him, he will serve you his wine with this freshwater prawn, lightly battered and fried from this local reservoir that's just down the road from the vineyard. So that's, in his word, the perfect pairing. Always pair local wine with local food. Hebei is also famous for many dishes, but I'll just mention some of the things I like personally. One is this big pot dumplings. It's quite unique to Hebei. So you probably know dumplings, right? Dumplings is eaten pretty much all across China, especially in the north part of China, right? But in Hebei, they have this special dish where they cook the dumpling with a huge pot of other ingredients, so it's called big pot vegetable, or sometimes maybe even with meat. So it's very flavorsome, as opposed to usually we just boil the dumpling and serve it with a dipping sauce. This type of dumpling is infused with flavors from this big pot. So 大锅菜煮饺子. And Hebei is also, well, in northern provinces of China, they are very good at making noodles and breads and things like that. Hebei especially have many types of shaobing, flatbreads, often with some kind of filling, meat or vegetable. The filling can be anything, but they have a lot of different varieties of shaobing, right? So so I would be inclined to again drink one of these white wines we've got today with any of these because the Longyan, I don't know, for those of you who have tasted, it has quite a nice herbal mineral aspect to it, which makes it a rather good food wine, the mineral savory aspect with the acidity, with a fairly gentle lightness, light-bodied, light, low alcohol. I think it goes quite well with these flatbreads with fillings. And it's worth mentioning that this area, Huailai, is very close to one of the most popular stretch of the Great Wall. You know, the Great Wall at Badaling is one of the most visited stretch of the Great Wall. So if you're ever going to visit Great Wall in the future, do plan a trip to a vineyard in Huailai. I would highly recommend that. It's by car, it's around 43 minutes from Badaling, Changchun, Great Wall at Badaling to this Huailai wine region. I mean, if you're in this general area of Beijing and Hebei, right? I mean, being the capital of China, you can imagine there are lots of places to visit. So here are only a handful of suggestions, all to do with the imperial China, right? So Gugong, Forbidden City, that's the imperial palace of China since Ming Dynasty. So Ming and Qing Dynasty, both the imperial palace are both based within the Forbidden City. And Temple of Heaven, very striking round building for worship and yeah, very iconic again, symbol of China, Temple of Heaven, Tiantan. And then you have places like the Summer Palace, Yiheyuan, and the Chengde mountain retreat was when the Qing emperors used to visit when they're going hunting. So Qing Dynasty, they have a great tradition of hunting because they came from the steppes, right? So they have a saying that we won all under heaven on horseback. Therefore, our descendants must know how to ride horses and hunt, right? It's the basic part of the education of all the princes. Therefore, they take hunting very, very seriously. So Chengde was mainly, well, started as a sort of a hunting lodge location, and then gradually became this palace site, which is also cooler. It's in the mountains, so it's called Bishu. Bishu is basically like a place to avoid the summer heat, right? So Chengde Bishu Shanzhuang is the Chengde mountain retreat for summer. And then you have the imperial tombs of the Ming and Qing dynasties, which is also very, is worth a visit. It's a vast amount of land in very beautiful rural setting, mountainous settings with ancient trees and lots of tombs of all the Ming and Qing dynasty royalties. So just a handful of places, must-see places when you are in Beijing and Hebei. Okay, so I think that's all I want to cover today. But next time we will be doing the wine regions along the Silk Road. And that's on the 22nd of November. And the wines we'll be tasting, one is a Marselan blend. We'll talk about Marselan. It's considered a rising star variety of China. So this is interesting. And then we'll talk about Ningxia. Ningxia is really the poster child wine region of China. It's probably the most famous wine region right now in China. And Jiabeilan, this particular property really put Chinese wine on the global map by winning one of the top international wine awards back in 2012. And suddenly the whole world, at least within the trade, within the wine trade, people started to take notice of China. And that kind of started with this wine, right? So that's for next time. Just a reminder, if you are interested to join us with the tasting, we still have a few cases left of this Chinese wine mixed case, which we will be able to post for free within the UK. So 6 Chinese wines from different regions, and it's available from the Cambridge China Center Wine Club website. So do check it out if you are interested in tasting the wines that we have talked about and we will be talking about in the following sessions as well. Okay, so that's all. I'm going to stop here. And Jingzhao, would you like to open the floor? And yeah, and let's see what everybody thought about the wines.
I have just opened everybody's audio and video. So if you check that, if you want to join in the conversation, sharing your thoughts about how you think of the wine webinar, do you like the wines today, the 2 wines, we have 1 of those, and you're free to open up your audio and video.
Okay. Hello, Hugh.
Hello, Jordan.
Hello.
We're here again.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Great. So,
who are you with, Hugh and Jane? Who are you with today?
We have 2 friends, one from Australia and one from Canada.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And we're drinking a little bit of our own port.
Yeah, I think it's too far away for us to send the wines to Canada and Australia, I'm afraid.
Hello, Trevor, Jenny.
Hello, Trevor and Jenny.
Hi, Jenny. So, well, anybody got any thoughts about the wines that we tasted today?
Oh,
These are good friends of ours.
I really Dragon Eye. I think that's really nice. And I like the other one too, but I didn't. Is there a word for this, Janet? When you don't really like the first glass, but you you like the subsequent ones. I mean, I do know what I mean though. Sometimes you have like a few sips of something, you don't like it, and then after a few sips, it tastes nicer. Is this?
Yeah, no, that's completely normal because sometimes, you know, one thing I haven't mentioned is sometimes the wines need to develop in the glass. It needs to oxygenate a bit. You know, it develops once it's being opened. That's why, well, with white wine it's less so because these are very light white wines. You don't need to decant them really. But certainly with a lot of red wines, you probably would notice a marked improvement if you decant the wine or as.
I love the kind of background. So when you said it was organic and all these things, I was like, this would be really good. And then when I opened it, I didn't initially like it, but now I kind of.
Yeah. No, that's completely normal. That happens a lot with most wines is that when, you know, it needs time. It's like a human, you know, it needs to stretch. It needs to stretch out, you know, once it's being poured out of the bottle. Yeah. So, yeah, no, that's completely normal. Usually, if you don't like a wine initially, do give it some time to develop.
I thought the wine was good. I like the story about the dog and the food. I think we've been in that position a few times.
Yes, next time, you know, reverse psychology trick definitely works. You're like, oh, don't eat my dinner.
Yeah.
The dog won't eat it. Yes.
I have a question, Janet.
Yeah.
Good evening. Hi. You mentioned burying the vines.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand that process and how that actually happens.
Right.
Do they actually lift the vines or?
No. They push it down. So they push it down to the ground and cover it with earth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very labor-intensive process, and that tend to have to happen in most of the northern vineyards in China. So next time when we talk about Ningxia and Xinjiang, they certainly have to bury the vines.
Right.
Yeah. So in Shandong, you don't have to because it's warm enough in winter. But but near Beijing, Hebei area, Hebei is sort of a toss-up in some regions. Yeah. So you can imagine it's mostly still done by hand. I think they're trying to develop some kind of machinery to first just layer a layer of soil on top, and then someone has to actually go and physically work. You know,
hard work.
It's very hard work. Yeah. So that's why Chinese wines are not actually that cheap to produce, because typically a third of the vineyard operational costs are spent on this burying and unburying process, because it has to happen twice, right? So you bury it in winter and then you dig it up again in spring, right? So it's do it twice a year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So has anyone had both wines?
Yeah, we've had both. Yeah.
Right. What did you think?
We think that they're very nice wines. I question the cost of the wine versus the not so much the quality, but I think it's hard to justify the price here.
Yeah, that's it's true. Yeah, I mean Chinese wines, of course, the fact that it's hard to compete at the moment with wines from Spain or France or Italy, you know, in the UK for sure, or even, I mean, UK, to be honest, is a very I think UK consumers are very spoiled for choice. You know, this is probably the best place to drink wines from anywhere in the world, I think, you know, so it's very competitive. You get great quality for great value. So Chinese wines at the moment, it's difficult to justify solely on pricing, you know. So that's why we have to sort of taste Chinese wine in the context of some events, or you know, having some story around this experience. It's more like an experience. It's not something you pick up in the supermarket and think,
I understand.
Best price wine I found. No, it doesn't quite work at the moment.
I understand. Okay.
I think they're interesting though. So it's sort of, I think it's worth paying the extra money because it's so interesting.
Yeah.
But which of the two do you prefer, Janet? Do you have a favorite?
So okay, I think they're both very interesting for different reasons. If I have to really choose one, I'd probably choose the Dragon Eye, just because it's a really interesting grape that you can't really find elsewhere, I suppose. So I like the story, you know, I like the fact that it's a European variety that's been growing in China for 800 years, and we don't, to the point that we can't find them in Europe anymore, and we don't actually know which European variety it corresponds to yet. You know, I'm sure they're doing all sorts of DNA testing and all. Eventually they'll probably find it, but I like the story, and I think it's a good food wine. It has that nice savory dimension, and because in China we always drink wine really with food, right? So it's important to have a wine that can that has affinity with Chinese food. But the Bonobao I also really like, because it's such an unusual blend, especially for a Chinese vineyard. You know, Chinese vineyard most of them still tend to make very traditional Bordeaux blend. You know, they make Cabernet Sauvignon, or for white wines it's usually Chardonnay, or you know, maybe Riesling. But for this winery to experiment with these rather interesting French varieties and come up with a rather interesting blend. I think it's character. It has character. That's why I like both of them because they're both very characterful wines. Yeah. Diplomatic answer.
Which one are you drinking, Trevor and Jenny? We cannot hear you.
Do they need to unmute?
Unmute.
Yes. Yeah, now we can. You got both.
Oh. Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Unmute.
Let me have a look.
Oh, there you go. You're on. You're in.
Oh, it's gone again.
No. Oh,
Are you there?
Are you there, Trevor?
Janet, I was looking online and it said that the Longyan was similar to the Gewürztraminer. Do you think that might be the roots that it came from, or have you read into that at all?
Sorry, it's close to what? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
Gewürztraminer, the German grape. So I know you said EU, so I was just curious if you read into that.
No, I don't think it's that. Yeah. No, I don't think they have conclusively found it yet. So interestingly, Longyan is, I think some of it is actually planted in Japan as well. But that might actually have gone from China rather than from Europe. But it's not clear yet. I tried to read up about any new developments in this sort of detective work, but yeah, I haven't heard anything conclusive at the moment. Let you know.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No worries. Cool. Okay.
I have one more question.
Sure. Yes.
The Longyang grape. When I've been in Asia, when you walk around the markets,
Yeah.
you see the very large grapes, the pink grapes. Are these
yeah.
the same grapes?
Well, probably. Well, it depends because there are quite a lot of different varieties of table grapes in China. So, but Longyan is one of these. Well, it started off as a table grape, so you might find them.
But I noticed when you showed the picture, they were pinky color.
Yes, yes.
And these are the ones I've seen.
Yeah.
In the market.
Yeah, but I think there are quite a lot of different ones.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not the most popular type of table grape either. It's just one of those things that's grown quite widely in certain parts of China.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's although it makes a white wine, but it's a pink skinned grape. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Martin, I agree with you. My experience about Dragon Eye, it's always this big, round, pink, juicy grapes in the supermarket.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I never know they can make into white wines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
That's why I thought I'd ask, because I've seen them many times.
Yeah. It could well be. Yeah, it could well be, but it could be something else as well. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We have Paul, Shan, and Yanping and husband video on. Are you tasting any of the whites tonight?
Not yet, but I would like to.
I tried the Longyan.
You prefer Longyan, the Dragon Eye?
I haven't tried the Bolong Bao yet, but I've tried the Longyan, which is, it's amazing actually. When I first had the first glass out the bottle, it was a bit flat, but giving it a little while, suddenly it's opened up and you have that very different aftertaste that you don't get.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly different and has its own character, which is what I find interesting, you know, because like you say, if you are going to sell wine in the international market and you're not competing just on price, you have to compete on character, right? So yeah, I think it's interesting for those reasons that it does have its own character. And I think it's a food wine, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we opened the Dragon Eye yesterday, and it's better today than yesterday.
Yeah, sometimes it works that way. Yeah, even with white wine, sometimes. Yeah, it's not necessarily the case that white wines are undrinkable the next day at all. Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. Some of these wines certainly I find develop quite slowly. Just give it time and give it another go, and it will just taste a bit different. If not better, maybe it's different. Yeah, so it's always worth drinking wine over a period of time, especially the finer wines. They always develop. Well, they should anyway. Yeah.
And with different foods as well.
Yeah, exactly. With different food, it will taste different. The wine will taste different. The food will taste different. So that's why it's quite fun, you know, to talk about wine and food, especially with Chinese food, you know, because it's quite challenging to find good wines to go with very pungent or aromatic Chinese food. So yeah.
I have a question, Janet. In China, people tend to eat a lot of spicy food. What wine will go well with spicy Chinese food?
So again, with spices, so two things you can consider. One is acidity. Again, I think acidity is like the savior of wine with Chinese food in general. So the classic suggestion would be things like Riesling, dry or off dry, you know, so a bit of sugar, so sweetness and acidity basically is what you want with spicy food, and lower alcohol, because if you're drinking a very alcoholic wine, you know, alcohol itself is a bit fiery, so you don't want to add alcoholic wine to spicy food. So you want something light, lower alcohol, but maybe with a bit of residual sugar or even a sweet of dry wine with good acidity.
Okay, great. Thank you. How are you, Yanping?
Yeah, we opened tonight. The first one was a 宝龙.
波龙堡.
Yes, 波龙堡. Yeah, we tried it, and we like it.
Yeah, very good.
Quite good, yeah. Well, when we saw you introduce those food, made us really wanted to try the food.
That's like my favorite bit as well, finding food pictures for the slides.
It was very nice, yeah.
Great, yeah, I'm glad to hear. I see Paul earlier.
Yeah. Last year we had a big event, Cambridge China Forum, and at the dinner we had a Bolongbao White.
Okay, yeah.
So we couldn't have it this time, but last year we had the white.
Yes, yeah, no, it's a good, yeah, it's quite a nice wine as an aperitif or with a starter. I think. Oh well, depends on the food. Yeah, I think, yeah, I also did a dinner last year with the Bolongbao White, so with the a starter course as well, and yeah, it's good. It has that good aromatics and but it's quite light as well, so nice as an aperitif or as a pairing with food. Paul, what did you think of the wines? Which one are you drinking? Paul? Hello.
Me?
Yes, I know you. Which one are you drinking?
No, I've only drank the Long Yan.
Yeah, okay. And?
I haven't tried the Bolongbao.
Okay. Is the Long Yan a bit? I know you've had it before, right? So are you?
Yeah. I was wanting to sort of revisit it with some different. But I think it's gone down quite well, actually. The first glass was a bit. Well, I just poured myself a little, like an inch in the bottom of the glass, and it was so-so. But then the second glass was fine and much more interesting. It's opened up a lot.
Yeah, it does need to open up a bit.
I had a question about the Martin Vineyard.
Okay.
So it was 97 or 96 when Ted Heath said you should put a vineyard here.
Yeah.
So how long did it take before they were producing wines?
Good question. That I don't know on the top of my head. I think that the earliest vintage I tasted was probably 15 from Martin, but I'm not. That doesn't really say anything in terms of when they started.
They buy the vines in then already.
No, I think they planted. Yeah. So usually, typically, in China, they start making decent wine around, well, decent, around 7 years, I suppose. So, yeah. So they do. Yeah. So the young vines from around 7 years old will start to be used for making wine on average, but no, I don't actually know when they started making wine, their first vintage.
Anyway, that Long Yan went well with curry, chicken curry.
Yeah, you were saying you were having curry, and I was like, ooh, yeah. I'm not sure. So, okay, interesting. What sort of curry? Is it quite strong or just?
Oh, no. It was a mild one. Okay. Just a chicken.
Well, I'll probably go with korma or something. Chicken korma. But probably not a vindaloo or something. Yeah. Okay, well, good to hear. Good to hear that you went well.
Hugh and Jin there drinking their own port.
Yeah.
We need to.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, we need to get Chinese wines next.
We can't get Chinese wine here, I'm afraid.
Can't get it in Portugal.
Which of the two whites was the more expensive one? I didn't look. So the Dragon
it's the Bolongbao is the more
the organic one, and is it a lot more expensive?
I think it's about £10 more. I think the Bolongbao was around 25 pounds or something in the UK.
Because I prefer the Dragon Eye. So it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's a lighter, easier drinking wine. It's more interesting. Interesting.
I prefer the taste, though, and the smells. I just like it better.
Yeah, I think Bolongbao, obviously, the cost base is quite high for that wine. It's fully organic. Secondly, it had a bit of French oak aging on it as well. So a bit of French oak. Again, that costs quite a lot to ship French oak to China. It'll cost about 3 times more than a French barrel in France. So yeah, so the cost of production is higher for the Bolongbao. Like you say, it's no indication of how much you might enjoy it.
Yeah, that makes sense because I don't often like oak. So
yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Yeah.
And we have Liu Li here commenting in the chat box says, I'm not sure she or he is drinking the Dragon Eye almost half bottle gone, which means he or she likes it.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent.
It was very good to learn about the vineyards around Beijing, though, and Hebei.
Right. Yeah.
I'll have to have a look to visit that Martin vineyard when I'm next over there.
Yeah, exactly. So all these vineyards, the benefit is that it's so close to, the Beijing area. They're very easy to get to. Yeah, and you can always combine it with some sightseeing. Yeah. It's a major advantage, them being close to the main markets, the most prosperous regions of China. So
Martin wants to speak.
Bill, remind me, which was the vineyard we went to near Beijing?
Changyu.
Changyu.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah.
And Trevor and Jenny, sorry, we lost you just now. I think are you?
Yeah, I think it's still on you. Yeah.
We still cannot hear you.
No.
They can put it in the chat box if they want. Just write any comments or questions in the chat box. We can hear you.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating because I'm a Chinese living and worked in China for many, many years, lived in Beijing for 10 years. It's really fascinating to know that there are so many wineries in different parts of China, even around Beijing, and even in their Fangshan, very tiny place, 18 wineries.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
and things really developing and really fast at fast speed.
Yeah.
And many of us have been to China, so really we got some new notes taken down for the future trips.
Yeah, perfect. That's good. Yeah, I really like these wine regions where they have a clear notion of how they want to distinguish themselves. So that make them worth watching and worth following. Fangshan being such a small area, but it has a very clear vision of wanting to to do sustainability and to be at the forefront of these sort of precision tech, sustainability-driven sort of viticulture. So it's quite interesting. Good.
Great, thank you, Janet. And it's also lovely to always catch up with friends in a very different way. It's so important when we're all locked down at home. It's good. Sunday night, you have another chance to put on nice clothes. See friends.
Yes. It's great because Lu Laoshi told me, oh, look, wear something, you know, I'm wearing something that match the flowers. Wear something red. So yeah, it's really good to see you all.
So next session in 2 weeks' time on the 22nd of November, and Janet will be talking about the Silk Road, which will include Xinjiang and Ningxia province, which are really the name card of Chinese wine.
Yes, indeed. So so see you in 2 weeks, I guess. And take care, everybody.
Take care. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you very much.
Really nice to see you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Judy, Martin.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Janet.
Take care.
Bye, Janet.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Tati, bye. Let us sleep.